So you may have been directed to come and watch this video if you've joined the Inner Engineering Recovery-based community, or maybe you just found it online. Regardless, I want to start this video off by sharing what the general purpose of the teachings are, okay? So my teachings are all revolving around empowering individuals to do three things primarily. Number one is building a healthy recovery community. Number two is restructuring the entire belief system from one that is rooted in fear to one that is rooted in love. Number three is literally transforming the entire relationship with the self from one that is rooted in unconscious abuse to one that is rooted in conscious love and support. So that is what we're doing, okay? And how can I talk about this? How can I teach on this? So now we're gonna get into a little bit of my life story, okay? It's important to know that I do have a formal education in social work, and I focused on mental health. So I have a master's in social work, I have an educational background, and I do work in the field, okay? I currently work at a hospital. However, the modality that I use has been primarily informed by my personal recovery experience. This is lived experience that we're talking about. Having overcome debilitating, severe mental health and addiction. I was born into a family that had long-standing mental health and addiction on both sides, both mom and dad. My mom and my dad had me when they were very young. They were high school sweethearts. They divorced before I was 2 years old, okay? Dad went on to remarry like 5 times and had severe substance use issues. Methamphetamines was the drug of choice. Mom remarried 3 times and just, was a child of an alcoholic upbringing, experienced an immense amount of trauma that was largely unresolved, and was raising me on her own. I mean, she did the best that she could, but little Justin was brought into a lot of very, very toxic, abusive situations, and the environment was extremely chaotic and unpredictable, to say the least. So we're not going to get into all of the stuff that happened as a child, because literally there's nothing special about that, and most anybody that's here can relate to these things in one way or another, okay? There was a lot of mental and emotional abuse, some physical abuse. I didn't experience sexual abuse, okay? But what's most important is that little Justin learned from a very, very young age that it was not okay to be his authentic self. That was not safe. In order to maintain love and attachment and belonging and acceptance, right, which is a human survival need, the most basic survival need, I had to abandon that authentic self, okay, which is the main conflict that we're all dealing with, which is what gets the ball rolling for these mental health implications, okay? So we talk about this every time that we have a new person in group, okay? Now, Justin also was extremely insecure with his sexuality. This was a very big part of my story, okay? And I have to talk about it because it's a part of who I am. My dad was anti-gay, okay? Very homophobic, grew up as a football player, and the constant message when I did see him was, you need to be more of a man. You look like a girl, you throw like a girl, you look at your hands like a girl, you talk like a girl, you hang out with girls. I was a freaking figure skater, y'all, so clearly I wasn't this, this model son that he had idealized, that wasn't me. So all of this is to say is that I was struggling with an immense amount of insecurity, okay? I was very awkward, I was very high strung, I was extremely anxious, on edge, hypervigilant, taking on all kinds of adult situations, being mediator to a lot of adult situations. I was just overly stressed out, operating with an extremely overrun nervous system, okay? And I didn't know that at the time. I wouldn't be little just saying, oh, my nervous system is super, dysregulated. That wasn't knowledge to me. I just knew that I felt super out of my skin. Okay. At 13, there was a major pivoting point. I was at my dad's. It was like Super Bowl Sunday, and my dad was like, "Why don't you go have a beer with your cousins? Be more of a man, hang out with the cousins." And I was like, "Okay, sure, you know." I'll never forget this day, and I'm going to talk about it and tell the story like it needs to be told. Okay, so I go out in the garage. My cousins are all doing their thing. They put 2 beers into a beer bong, one of those old school ones with the funnel and the pipe coming down, you know, the tube coming down with this PVC pipe situation. I mean, it was pretty cool, honestly, but they put the 2 beers in. I was all nervous, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. Turn that PVC pipe, those beers went down so fast, and I'll tell you that it was like night and frickin' day. It was like instantaneously, I felt this crazy release like I had never felt before. And some of you might know what I'm talking about, okay? So this version of Justin felt fun and free and funny and cool, and dad was happy, and cousins liked him, and he wasn't insecure about his sexuality. I feel like I laughed for the first time in my life. I felt like I was present for the first time in my life. I was on fire. Okay? Game over. That became my solution for everything at 13. Okay? As life went on and I continued to, evolve, drugs and alcohol became the answer. And I chased that same feeling, okay? And then it turned into higher level drugs, coke and meth and inhalants and pills and mixed with the booze. And of course, marijuana was involved in that the whole time. And then something happened when I became, around 17, 18, this is about the time that I came out, but I started to get attention for the way I looked. Attention that I never got before, okay? Like, I only got negative attention before. I started getting positive attention for the way I looked. People started thinking I was attractive, and when I came out, that became a whole issue in and of itself because I liked that. I needed that because inside, I was completely disconnected and broken and lost and felt like nothing. Was completely feeling unworthy and unlovable. And if you like me, then that means that I'm worth something. If you like me and you think I'm attractive, then I must be valuable and I must be worthy, right? We get this. Very dangerous. Very, very dangerous, okay? So from the age of 13 to 28, that was my drinking and drug career, okay? It wasn't that long. I mean, it was about 15 years. And what took place in this 15 years was very extreme, okay? Some could say next level. I was a blackout, pissed the bed drunk. Okay, to paint the picture, I was that person that you would see at the bar in the club, completely out of their mind, walking around, slurring their words, eyes rolling around, not knowing what's going on, food falling off, drinks spilling over. I would pass out at the bars. I would pass out on the curb. I would pass out in the car. I would pass out behind the alley in the dumpsters. I would go home with people I didn't even know. I would drive blacked out. I wouldn't know who or what or how I got home. It was a regular thing that I'd wake up in the morning and I'd look outside and be like, holy shit, I fucking drove home last night? Like, what the fuck happened? And I had to be calling everybody up and figuring out what happened. I would piss the bed all the time. Okay. I would just piss on everything, honestly. I would wake up in the middle of the night and just be pissing in the closet, or I'd piss on the treadmill, or I'd piss on the coffee table. I would try to jump out of cars. It was insanity, okay? I got multiple DUIs. I got 2 DUIs and 3 arrests, and had many failed relationships, highly abusive relationships, would lose jobs, would get kicked out of the house, you get the picture, okay? It wasn't pretty. It was very dangerous, very dangerous. During this time, I was also diagnosed with many mental health implications, on and off with multiple different therapists. Depression, anxiety, panic disorder, severe bulimia, obviously severe substance use disorder, bipolar. I was on multiple psychotropics, 4 different antidepressants, 3 different controlled substances for anxiety. I would have panic attacks so bad. Avatar, please, not right now. I would have panic attacks so bad that I would literally be hyperventilating. Okay, so some of you may understand this, right? Like I would convulse, my body would lock up, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't talk. This was a regular thing, y'all. This was my life. Depakote for bipolar, that was another mental, and I have to talk about all of this stuff. I have to share that this was, what I was dealing with. Now, another major, huge transition point was in my early 20s. I diagnosed with HIV. And dude, I was the person at the club that if somebody kissed me and I came to find out that they had HIV, I was like disgusted. I was like, I can't even believe that you would think to kiss me knowing that you have HIV. Like I had no clue. That's how big the internalized shame around HIV was. And look what happened. I got it. Okay? I know exactly who I got it from. And I asked, did you get tested? Whatever. I was out of my mind drunk, didn't care about my health, slept unprotected. Months later, I'm kind of sick and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Asked this person who I'd now been dating to go get tested. They came back positive. It took me a year to gather up the nerve to go down and get tested. So I just lived in this complete, absolute, chaos within, not knowing. Still sleeping with that person, like unprotected, even though I didn't even know I had it. This is just to paint the picture of what Justin's life was like, okay? At 28, the gig was up. I got a second DUI. I was exhausted. I failed to mention that during that 15 years period, I also was in inpatient rehab, 2 different outpatient rehabs. And while I was in inpatient rehab, I actually had a very, very pivotal moment where the fog lifted. I went into rehab like, I don't have a problem. If you knew my life, blah, 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 blah. I'm just having fun. I'm not doing anything wrong. La, 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 la. About a week into rehab after being stone cold sober, the fog lifted. And it was like, whoa, girl, you have a problem. Okay, this is not normal. You haven't gone a day in 7.5 years without a substance or something in your body. Okay? The fog that lifted was like, whoa. And I was introduced to 12-step recovery, and I knew that there was a solution. I didn't stay sober. I wasn't ready yet. That's important. I wasn't ready yet. I had to go back out and do more experimentation. And I did. And many more bad things happened, actually, okay? It was actually during that time that I got diagnosed with HIV, after treatment. So yeah, I had to go back out and do more experimentation for sure. But anyways, the whole point of that was to share that fog lifting changed the way that I drank and used, because now I knew that I had a problem and I knew there was a solution, and I couldn't drink and use freely anymore. There was always that tinge of guilt, like, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, there's a better way. But it took another 5 years for me to actually surrender to this disease that we call addiction. Okay? Still dealing with all the mental health implications. At 28, I got arrested for my second DUI, and I just remember that day very vividly. It was just done. I was just done. I literally remember thinking to myself, I can't do this anymore. I'm done drinking and using. And it was a very big relief. There was like a relief that came over me in that surrender. And then I got very serious about my recovery. I got very active in 12-step recovery. That was the modality that I knew. Okay? And I'm going to say right now that I love me some 12-step, okay? 12-step saved my life. I am no longer active in 12-step. Okay, nothing against it. Nothing against it. I've taken the best parts of that program and I have infused them into the modality that I use now. But I've also combined a trauma-informed approach that has to do with nervous system regulation and having a compassionate, loving relationship with the self. And a lot of that is missed in 12-step recovery, okay? Take it or leave it, take the best or leave the rest, but this is what I know to be true. I was in this program for, a decade and very active. So I got my sponsor. I was working the steps. I was going to a ton of meetings. I was, working my get well job. I was taking care of my DUI, got through the house arrest, paying off debts, just doing everything I thought. I was doing everything I thought. Going to some events like camping trips and trying to engage with a community, but not effectively building a healthy recovery community. Blind spot number one, okay? That's why from the very beginning, I am so huge on building community, because it is very, very important. It is vital to our transformative process, okay? I wasn't really doing that. 2 years and 8 months after doing all this work, hardcore work, okay, the mental health was getting worse. Emotional health, getting worse. I literally became passively suicidal, okay? At 2 years and 8 months of doing all this work. So of course, for me, I'm sitting here thinking, what the fuck? This isn't working. This is not working, okay? I was better off drinking and using. At least I had moments of relief. Like, this sucks. I'm not drinking. I'm missing out. I can't do drugs. My life is boring. I'm going to all these meetings. I'm feeling like shit. I'm more depressed than ever. I'm more anxious than ever. My relationship is sucking right now. I keep saying something's missing. Everything looks gray. I want to die. Okay, that's really where I was at. And I was at the brink. This is a very critical turning point in my story, which informs a lot of what I teach. I was about ready to relapse, okay? And I didn't mention this, but for anybody that's watching this, anybody that I work with will know that I encourage them to have an accountability partner, somebody that they care about and love deeply, that they're letting into their recovery life. Mine was my sister, my 11-year younger sister. Okay, she was a very big part of my recovery life. And if it wasn't for that, I would have relapsed. I would have, because I didn't give a shit about myself. I didn't care, but I cared about letting her down, right? And putting her back through the train wreck that I put my family through, but mainly her, because I know that the effect I had. So I was about ready to relapse. And the mental health was out of control. I was getting ready to go back on different medications, because I was actively having those, intake appointments and getting back to like figure that out. And this is where crazy stuff happened, okay? So rather than relapsing, I decided to go to a 12-step meeting. Not any meeting, but the one meeting that was on a Wednesday night, because this is when shit hit the fan, and it was a men's stag meeting, a straight men's stag meeting, where I historically felt the most out of my skin, okay? It was a little bit like this. I see all of these men having these relationships. They're having fun, and here I come. I want to have what they have, but I can't have what they have because I'm gay. And they're going to think that I'm hitting on them, and they're going to think that, I'm into them, and that's just really uncomfortable, so I can't have that, so I'm just going to keep myself away. I can't really share at this meeting because I can't really relate to any of these people, right? I can't let them in. I can't tell them what I'm going through because I'm gay and they're straight. This was just some of what was going on, but it was the only meeting that I knew, and I went there. And I was tore up, okay? I was fucking tore up. Crying, had been crying, my eyes were all puffy. And, I shared in that meeting that I was legitimately just going through it. And there was one person in that meeting, and I know I'm getting detailed, but it's very important. And this guy who was straight, extremely good looking, very buff. He would come to the gay meeting sometimes with like his little clan, right? Because it was like kind of a mixed meeting, but all the gay guys would be like all over him, and Tom, oh my God, he's so hot. And I was so jealous of him. I was so insecure of him, Avatar. And I would just secretly from afar, like judge him and criticize him and think that he's so full of himself and he's a piece of shit. And why would he come to these meetings? And just all this negativity, all this freaking fear and negativity, right? And at the end of that meeting, he comes up to me, okay? And he's like, he reached out a hand and he said, we're grateful that you were here. I hope that you come back. And stop. And I remember that moment so clearly because all of a sudden I just let it out and I'm just telling him everything. everything that I had felt and what I thought about him, and that I'm gay and I want what they have, but I can't have it, and everything I just shared with you. I let this other human being know this, right? And he literally listened to all of it. And he just said, Justin, and he handed me his number. He said, Justin, the only difference between you and I is the flesh that we lust after. Why don't you come to this young person's meeting with me tomorrow night out in Corona? I'd like to introduce you to some of the people I know. And I was like, what? I'm like getting chills just thinking about it right now. Number one, I was like, I can't even believe that this like poetry came out of his mouth, right? I was like, what the hell was that? But the fact that he just handed me his number, okay, and like, I was just flabbergasted. It was just like, what? Okay, so that was the first what. Then the next thing was, the next part in my mind, and this is so key, is I was like, there's no way. Well, I called my sponsor and I told her everything that had happened, right? And she's like, were you going to go to the meeting? And I said, no. She's like, why? I was like, I don't know. It's going to be weird. Like, I don't know anybody. I can't go to that meeting, right? And I told her that he had offered to drive. She said, do you work? And I said, no. She's like, then you're going to go to that meeting. And I was at a place where I told you I was open-minded, willing, and honest, right? So I took the direction. I was like, all right, I'll go to the meeting, but I'm driving. And she said, why? I said, because we're not going to have anything to talk about. It's going to be weird. What? We're going to drive a half an hour out to Corona. I was living in Riverside at the time, and I have nothing to talk about with this straight guy. Like, it's going to be freaking weird. I'm not getting in the car with him. And she was like, Justin, you're going to go with him. And once again, I took direction. Okay? I went to this meeting, and we had a great conversation. It turned out that he also had an eating disorder, which I was like, what the fuck? He asked me to share at this meeting. I got up, didn't want to do this, but I shared in front of all these people, these young people, from my heart. Okay? For like the first time ever, just sharing like from my heart. Okay? Allowing myself to be seen and vulnerable in front of all these people. And the feedback that I got, and the feedback that I got was so positive. My life. Sorry. Fuck. My life has never been the same since this experience, okay? And I didn't know what had happened at this point, but I know now. I know now that I was at a crucial point where I was about ready to give in. The fear had woken up, and I chose to devote myself to the plan. And I took an immense amount of contrary action that was showing love and support to myself by going to the meeting versus relapsing, by getting in this car with this person, by going to that other meeting, by getting up and talking to these people, right? And all of these limiting beliefs, these things that I had thought were so true, these identities that I were attached to, were being proven invalid, okay, to me. And the second that happened, there was a massive up level in my consciousness, because I saw very clearly that this wasn't real and that I had created this. This is the self-fulfilling prophecy that we talk about, okay? This is the importance of belief system restructuring. There's a better way to do it than having to go 2 years and 8 months in absolute hell and having the experience that I had. There's a much more accelerated and effective way to do it, which is what I teach. But I hadn't learned there was still more to go, okay? And this is the next component about the relationship with self, okay? Because I hadn't woken up to that yet. This next period of my life was very, very crucial, very important, okay? Before this, no one wanted me to sponsor them. I would go to these meetings and no one would ask me to sponsor them. And I was like, why does nobody want them? Why does nobody ask me to sponsor them? Like, I feel like I have a lot to offer, and I would like ask my sponsor, and finally, eventually, he got pissed and he's like, Justin, you don't have anything anybody wants. If you did, they would ask you to sponsor them, you know? This was prior, right? This was during that time when I was really, really depressed and low. After this period of time that I'm sharing with you, where these limiting beliefs were proven to be invalid through my own personal experience, I couldn't keep the sponsees off of me. It was like I felt like I couldn't even go to meetings because I was like, oh my God, like I can't take any more sponsees on. Like I don't understand what's happening. The mental health implications, large. I never, ever, ever said I was depressed again after that. I never took any psychotropics after that. Free. The jealousy, the envy, this crazy crippling anxiety, this disconnection, this fear, this constantly being like in my head and self-conscious, largely gone. Okay, it was like a massive rebirth. And this time got very exciting for me, you guys, like very exciting. This is when I decided I was going to go back to grad school and I was going to specialize in mental health and a helping profession. And, you know, I started to do that. And I was very busy. I was working with a lot of people in the program. I was sponsoring a bunch of people and going to meetings. And I was just like in it. Because that book, that blue book, became my life. It was no longer a fictive tale. It was like, holy shit. I see it. I'm living it. It's real. This shit's real. These people's experience is real. The miracle. They say, don't leave before the miracle happened. This was the first miracle that happened. But I had more learning to do. So another 7 years, okay? I was going, getting my education, writing my thesis. I had gotten into financial services because I was going to become a financial social worker, and I was getting all of the series licenses, okay? If anybody knows about the series licenses, it's a lot, okay? And you can ask me about that separately, but I went all the way up to the Series 65 and got a life insurance license all within 2 years because I was going to be a financial social worker and I was going to correct a financial injustice, okay? It was great. I have a financial education. I don't even have those licenses anymore. But the most important thing was that I drove myself into the ground during this period of time, okay? Because I was unknowingly trying to prove my worth and value through all of these external things. If Justin gets really good at this and he's really needed by all these people in recovery, like he's worth something, right? Like he's got something to live for, okay? No. Backwards. Hit a bottom. A friend of mine who I used to sponsor said, I think you could benefit from CODA. That's a 12-step meeting on codependency. I was like, me? Codependent? Are you crazy? I'm hyper independent. I can't be codependent. I do everything on my own. But she was like, Justin, I think you might really get something out of it. That first meeting I sat in, right? Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I sat in that meeting and they put the patterns up on the screen and I was like, holy shit. I'm codependent. And some of the most painful patterns that I had were the avoidance patterns, okay? Because this is one thing I haven't talked about yet, but I was still very, very intimate avoidant, okay? And I thought I was just plagued by this because I had all these other good things going on in my life, but yet I couldn't feel comfortable with intimacy. I couldn't really feel comfortable with being gay. I had a lot of insecurity around that. Still dealing with a lot of my internalized shame. Didn't think that, but I was. And it was very painful. Intimacy avoidance, I think, is one of the most painful things that a human being can go through because we're meant to have love and connection. And when we don't feel safe enough within ourselves to be vulnerable and intimate with another human being, it literally severs so much joy that life has to offer. And I can speak on this because that's not my life anymore, okay? So I ended up getting a CODA sponsor. And he was super militant, and we were going in deep, and I was doing all this CODA work, getting really into like the past, like the childhood traumas that had to do with attachment issues, looking at the neglect, the abuse, the rejection, and all this stuff. And it didn't take long, y'all, because I had done all this other recovery work. So within like 3 months of doing this work, and I remember he gave me an exercise. He told me, you got to call every single person on the phone list. And there was like 75 names on this phone list. And I was like, what? I was like, I can do all this work over here, but this phone list, I don't know about that. But I did it, okay? Because I was willing to do it. And that was the most comfortable thing. I'm going to tell you that the first number I called in that list, just like a cold call, I was in tears. I was so scared to call this human being, this random person, and introduce myself as a CODA member. Like, that is how much insecurity I was dealing with. That is how much codependency I was dealing with. Like, I'm so worried about what they're going to think about me. I'm just going to introduce myself. It's a whole nother side story. But anyways, about 3 months into doing this work, I had the second most transformative experience of my life. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was doing this work and I was going through these past traumas. I was going through these people in my life that were abusive. And I saw so clearly that all these voices around me looking like a girl, and you're Justine, not Justin, and you talk like this or whatever, just all these insecurities about all these different things, especially the gay stuff, were not my voice. It was not me. This was society, this was caregivers, this was past people, but it was not me. And the second that I woke up to this, I realized that I had been living my entire life up until this point in this unconscious relationship with myself, rooted in neglect, abuse, and rejection. All just wrapped up in abandonment. And when I saw that, it was like, I can't even tell you. That was like when I think I first relocated my authentic self, because at that it was like a different person was born, like overnight. All these things that used to just take all my attention and time, like perfecting this thing and gardening and just getting all meticulous about this, and everything had to be perfect, and mastering this decoration and having a perfectly clean house and like all this fear around relationships and just I have to do. Gone. And what became important was my day-to-day life experience. What is Justin doing today that feels good? What is this relationship like? Building deep relationships. Having the most intimate experiences. I became from intimate, avoid it, to like the most crazy intimate individual. That people were like, what the fuck? Like people who were experiencing this were like, what the fuck is going on with this? And it felt so good. That became something I had to monitor in and of itself, okay? Because I'm still growing and actively like learning, y'all. Like we never arrive, and I'm not trying to say I arrived, but this has been my life experience, and this is what I'm teaching, right? But I'm still growing. I'm still applying this stuff every single day of my life. But all to say was that literally I was free at this point, okay? That boulder went over the cliff. I could stand in my shoes and I could like look at myself and say, Justin, you're enough. You're lovable. You're worthy. You're capable. You're fucking cool. You're awesome. You have strong morals and values. You have discipline. You can do it. You're safe. You're safe because you have you. And that was it. My life has never... Everything in my life transitioned at that point. My entire purpose came online. My mission came online. It was like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. My mission is to help and empower others to find their authentic self, to have fun, to build community, to shift this entire belief system from fear to love, and transition this relationship with themselves from unconscious abuse to conscious love and support. It was so evident to me in the way that I teach it, as I help people understand, like somebody who truly loves themselves and trusts themselves and supports themselves, they would never put themselves into these dangerous situations. They wouldn't put toxins into their body. They wouldn't drink and use drugs the way that we can find ourselves. They wouldn't just be putting themselves in these horrific relationships and people pleasing and not setting boundaries, because they don't have that relationship with themselves. It's not a match. They want to feel healthy. They would only do things that are healthy. Okay, so a lot of this mental health and addiction stuff is all rooted in that unconscious relationship with self, which is all rooted in that abandonment that we are talking about, the abandonment of the authentic self and that fear-based belief system. And not only is what we do and what we teach about overcoming that, but a major part of that is building authentic, healthy relationships. Now, these relationships are going to be the people that we have for the rest of our lives. They're going to become our tribe, but they're going to reflect back to us all of the good stuff, all of our truth, not all of the illusion. They're going to reflect back to us our truth, because they're speaking the same language, and they're going to help us to have those up levels way quicker. They're going to be the people that help us have those new experiences that are proving the belief system to be invalid. like I shared with you when I had that first major up level, right? With Tom and that whole community. Then the second one through Coda. That's all that happened. These limiting beliefs that had been a part of my life, that had become who I was, that I was so attached and identified with, proven invalid through my own experience. And the second that happened, bye, and a new version was born. I really like that version. And I'm committed to the Recovery Wizard program. I'm committed to the inner engineering recovery-based community. But most importantly, I'm committed to just embodying and doing for myself, showing up as my authentic self and trusting in the rest, trusting in the process. I really hope that this video, this testimony can shed some light on why I do what I do, why I'm passionate about what I'm passionate about, why I teach what I teach, where this modality came from, and why I can help other people to have an effective strategy from the very beginning. I have lived in these pitfalls. I have lived in the suffering. I have felt the depths of this hell. And I've also felt heaven on earth. And I really just hope that you find this well. I hope to see you continuing to come back to the the inner engineering community. And if not, that's fine too. Till next time, much love.